Hello everyone, apa khabar? In one of our previous video, we've looked at usage of the prefix and suffix of per and an together with a verb and what it produces. So what if it's only a prefix of per without an after the verb? So this is an easier prefix. So the simplest way to compare in English would be it's similar to adding a suffix er behind a verb in English. So this would produce a word that means the doer of the verb or the person making the action. For example, the word for listen or hear in Malay is dengar. Pendengaran would be hearing. So this is as in our previous lesson. But if it's just pendengar, it would mean listener. Another example is to make. In Malay is buat. Pembuatan would be the making of or production. But pembuat would mean the maker of something. There would be different variations of the prefix per depending on the verb itself or with what letter it starts with. So it can be just pe, per. It can be pem, pem, peng, peng, pen, pen, or peny, pen, depending on the first letter of the verb. So let's look at examples to understand this further. The verb lari means to run. For verbs that starts with the letter L, we just add pe, per, in front of it to produce pelari, which means runner. Tan pelari paling laju dekat sekolah ni. Tan pelari paling laju dekat sekolah ni. So that means Tan is the fastest runner at this school. So verbs starting with B would require an additional M added with per. For example, baca is to read. A reader is pembaca. Pembaca berita tu kawan saya. Pembaca berita tu kawan saya. That newsreader is my friend. But if the verb starts with a C, instead of a M, you add N with a per. For example, curi is to steal. Pencuri is a thief. Pencuri kereta tu dah kena tangkap. Pencuri kereta tu dah kena tangkap, which means the car thief has been caught. For verbs starting with G, we add peng before the verb. So guna means to use. Pengguna is a user. Semua pengguna kena pulangkan semua alatan dalam masa 10 minit. Semua pengguna kena pulangkan semua alatan dalam masa 10 minit. So that means all users have to return all equipment in 10 minutes. Peng is also added if the verb starts with a vowel. A-E-I-O-U. For example, edar is to distribute. So we just add peng to form pengedar, which means distributor. Reza kerja sebagai pengedar komponen enjin. Reza kerja sebagai pengedar komponen enjin. So that means Reza works as an engine components distributor. So those are examples where the verbs are retained and we just add a prefix in front of them. There are also verbs where slight changes are required to the initial letters and replacements are being made in addition to the PE prefix. For example, if the verb starts with an S, we drop the S and add PENY with the verb. So for example, sangkut is to hang. If we drop the S and add PENY, it becomes penyangkut, which is a hanger. Nara guna penyangkut baju untuk sangkut scarfnya. Nara guna penyangkut baju untuk sangkut scarfnya. So that means Nara uses a clothes hanger to hang her scarf. Another letter which is dropped from the verb infinitive would be P. For example, pandu, which is to drive. So if we want to add PE per prefix, we need to drop the P and add an M. So it becomes pemandu, which means a driver. Pemandu van tu Chin. Pemandu van tu Chin. So that means the driver of that van is Chin. Another letter which is dropped from the infinitive form is the letter T. So the T is dropped and PEN is added to form the word. For example, tulis is to write. So the T is dropped and PEN is added. Penulis means a writer. Dia penulis terkenal dari Canada. Dia penulis terkenal dari Canada. So that means he is a famous writer from Canada. So there may be questions as to what are the rules or the guidance in terms of what's the prefix to use with which letter. So this would be a rough guidance. If the verb starts with BFPV, we add PEM in front of the infinitive of the verb. If it's S, we drop the S and add PENY and so forth. But there are always exceptions. For example, the verb kritik means to criticize, but a critic is pengkritik. So the K is retained in this case, but in other cases like kayo, which means to paddle, a paddler or an oar is pengayuh, whereby the K is dropped. So it's different from pengkritik, where the K is retained. Another exception would be belajar, which is to learn. But a student is pelajar, not pembelajar. Okay, that's all for this lesson. If you have any questions, please drop a comment below.